All right, seeing as it's 5:02, we'll call the Tuesday, January 7th Business Operations and Finance Committee meeting to order. Ms. Hope, can I have a roll call?
Yes, you may. Greg Schneider,
Present.
Brian Nichols,
Here.
and Brian Anderson.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye, that passes. Item 1D, approval of minutes. Any comments, revisions, questions on the minutes? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved. Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously. We'll go on to item 2A, monthly financials, the November 24 monthly financials. Mr. Shady.
There we go. Good evening. Tonight we're reporting on the month end for November of 24, and we'll walk through the financial activity report as is customary. We'll start by looking at the monthly summary report. Let me expand this, see if I can get that. There we go. It's a little bit better for those viewing at home or on the screen. The monthly summary report reflects revenues and expenses received or paid for each of our various funds that are listed in the left-hand column, the fund column. On the far right, the inflows and outflows. Inflows reflect monies coming in. Outflows reflect monies going out of the district for each of the funds. You can see total revenues for the month of November, just over 1.9 million at the bottom of the page. Total expenses for the month of November, over $6.75 million. So we have outflows, expenses exceeding our revenues by about $4.8 million in the month of November. Pretty typical, so don't be overly alarmed by that. Yeah, it's simply a reflection of our cash flow and when the district receives substantial revenues, about 4 or 5 months of the year instead of all 12 months. Coming back up and talking about some of them, so general fund, you can see revenues just over $1 million, expenses 4.7 million, so outflows exceeding there by 3.6 plus million. A couple of lines down, Fund 27, our special education fund, revenues 682,000, expenditures just under 1.6 million, so outflows exceeding revenues by just over 900,000. Important to point out there, and we'll talk about this again just momentarily, a large portion of that $682,000 in revenues in Fund 27 in the month of November came in a state special education categorical aid payment that was received. And then since food service down here has significant outflows, over $380,000, largely attributed to coming back, middle of the page there, the revenues just under $35,000. So we did not receive a meal claim reimbursement received in the month of November, which is not really any pause for alarm. That's simply a timing matter. I'm sure that we'll see that receipt come in if it wasn't in December. So that's just a timing impact. So no real concerns there. But again, just kind of pointing out $1.9 million in revenues for the month, almost 6.7, almost $6.8 million in expenses for the month. So our outflows or our fund balance position decreased by $4.8 plus million. Any questions on that? Speaks for itself. Good. Let's talk a little bit about our cash and investment report. Let me make this a little bit smaller so we can get it all there on the page. So again, this portion of the financials talks about where our cash assets were at the end of the month, November of 24, as reflected in the current end of current month column. Column immediately to the right of that is the end of the prior month, so that would reflect October of 24. And then the far right column, the previous year end of the current month, reflects November of 23 for comparative purposes. So if you come down to the bottom and look at that total cash and investments, you can see about 8.4 million here at the end of November. That was over 13.7 million at the end of October. And then if you scroll to the far right, over 21.6 million, the end of November of 23. You would be wise to ask the question, why are we at 21.6 million a year ago and 8.3 million currently? And let me just answer the question before it's asked. Keep in mind that the district paid off a significant portion of our long-term debt back in April of 24, utilizing some of those resources that were included here in the November of 23. It was about $14 million. So some of that was current year payments, some of that was future year payments. So the exact impact probably is in that $12 to $13 million range. But if you add that to the 8.3, we're kind of netting out, ballpark right back at that 21.6 million. So just kind of explaining that change. Couple of other items or rows here on the cash and investment report that we'll talk about just real briefly. So the ICS shadow row, the second row from the top, that is essentially our sweep account with First Mid. You can see we had about 3.5 million distributed amongst various financial institutions at the end of October. And then at the end of November, it was down under $5,000. The reality is that $4,903.52 was essentially in interest receipts that came in during the month. So the reality is that we had all of the money in our sweep account. We had pulled that back and we're using it to meet our day-to-day obligations. We were that tight on cash at that point in time, and we'll speak about that again here momentarily. And then I'll just direct your attention to the OPEB Trust Fund 73 at Associated Bank row. You can see there, a slight $60,000 increase. Interest earnings or unrealized gains on investment is what attributes to that. Just as a brief sidebar, I'm hopeful that we can place the OPEB 73 trust on our February committee meeting just for an educational purpose. Lots of conversation about OPEB trust over the last 6 to 8 months. I think it would be good to provide a little bit of a history about that and then again talk about how those resources can be utilized going forward. So sorry for that side note, but since we were talking about it, I just want to dangle that carrot a little bit. Let's look at the last portion of the cash and investment report. And that shows that row total general fund operating budget assets, 1.5 million. That's essentially adding up the first two rows on the sheet, which are general fund assets available to us. So again, you can see that. And then that approximate number of days of liquidity, if you remember, about 3 weeks or so ago, you heard me talk about 5, kind of biting my nails. There it is, right? So, a year ago, we had 45 days of cash liquidity available to us. Keep in mind, to be honest with you, that's inflated because some of the assets that were included in the general fund and that ICS shadow row really should have been reported in the debt service row, restricted for that purpose. We just kind of do a blinder to that and overlook that for now. But more importantly, school districts typically hit a low point in cash about the 3rd and 4th week of November. We cut it close. The good news is we didn't have to tap into our short-term line of credit. Ms. Elwood and I were monitoring. We felt confident. As mentioned, I think, again, 3 weeks ago, we did hold payment to 2 of our larger vendors, and I personally contacted them via email to let them know that their payment would be delayed by about a week. They were understanding, maybe a little bit upset, but nobody came back and said, no, we need it now. So we use those techniques to get over and get through that low point. Any questions on cash and investments?
Yeah, Mr. Nichols.
Mr. Chady, thank you.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the OPEB at Associated Bank. So why do we not have an interest rate showing there in the instance of transparency? So,
Yeah, the interest rate for the accounts at First Mid, the interest rate comes printed on the account statement. On the Associated Bank statement, it does not come printed. And a calculation, I'm not sure that it's necessary.
well, I guess I kind of differ. I think that the public needs to know what kind of interest we're making. Everything else is shown except that one, and that's a large sum of money. So,
True, but that one's likely to go away
Right.
over the course of the next year, 2 or 3. The other challenge with calculating the interest rate on that is that there is it's a combination of interest earnings and unrealized gain or losses on investments.
okay,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Is it safe to say, because you mentioned how, we look at the total cash investments versus November last year because of the payment made in April, so we can expect to see that every month until after April?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe
Yes.
we can answer, answering that question today might save us for answering it for a couple months?
Right. Yep. It would be a repetitive comment for the next, 3-4 months until that point, right? Come the end of April of '25, then we'll have a much clearer correlation in those values going forward.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yep. Mr. Hankins?
Mr. Chady, yeah, I'm sorry to belabor that point again, that, we have been talking about that payment that was made. Could you just do a brief thumbnail on that payment? Because I was led to, in my own mind, I thought that was done prior to your coming, and maybe that's a different payment, and I'm sorry that I'm just a little bit confused on that payment that was made.
Are you talking the debt payment that was
Yes.
made back in April?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that payment, we satisfied both the principal and interest amounts that were due as of April 1st of 2024. And then we had sufficient assets available to pay off the remaining principal payments. Think of it as a mortgage payment that you're paying off your mortgage 3 years early. So you're making your current monthly mortgage payment, interest payment allotted to that, and then you've requested that payoff amount, and you've made that payment then as well. So that's kind of what happened. The district had intentionally levied in excess of the amount that was necessary in Fund 39 let me just make sure I get my mindset right here, fall of '22, because the money was received in '23. We have a 13-month holding period with that money that we could use, which then we utilized. That got us to April of '24 to make the payment.
Okay, I'll just ask, prior to you coming here, was there a big payment made on debt owed that you have said that was done before my time, and I'm paraphrasing, had I been involved in that, I might not have done that, which greatly affected how our financial outlook was? I don't know, I'm not sure what I'm referring to, but maybe you do?
Yeah, it's not, it's pretty typical for districts to make debt defeasances or to prepay debt. That can be very advantageous to the district, and it was to Beloit as well. That's why our equalization aid went from about 60.5 million with the estimate to like 67 million this year. Because of that. I don't recall any debt obligation transactions that the district has done that had caused me to scratch the back of my head to say, why did they do that? Yeah.
And I would just say two things. That's also the reason why we already know that even if nothing happens, the mill rate portion to local taxes is going to go up because of
Correct.
by not having that debt to pay, say, this year,
Right.
it's going to lower our levy from the state.
Right. So a good way to think about it, and again, I'm going to use some ballpark numbers because I don't have the specifics, but in April of '24, we paid off about $12.5 million in debt related to Fund 39. That 12.5 factors into the equalization aid formula and helped us favorably so that our aid estimate, or our aid changed from the estimated value on July 1st from like 60.5 million to about 67, 68 million dollars. So it was an increase of $7+ million in aid. Now going forward, about 10 months from now, we're not going to have that extra 12.5 million floating through the equalization aid formula. So removing that, I would anticipate that our equalization aid in 10 months or so will be about the same that it was last year, around that 60.5, and thus we're going to lose about $7.5 million in aid. The district does have about $2.2 million of remaining Fund 39 debt that we can prepay, and I'm having conversations with Baird about doing that. That payment is also due on April 1st. It's unlikely that we'll prepay it all on April 1st. We've got the assets in hand to do it, but we'll likely do the final payment in mid-June, which is a little bit different because usually you'd want to pay it early so that you don't incur that unnecessary interest expense. The reality is, within the equalization aid formula, the more money that you spend, the better it helps you. So by not paying it off until, 8 weeks or so later, we actually have 8 weeks or so of interest earning or interest expense that then helps us in the equalization aid formula. That too will be coming at a future committee meeting, and I think I've got that one for March, if I recall correctly. March might be, I think it is March, just in case the board decides or the committee decides that they want to pull that trigger on April 1st, so.
And just follow up on that, Bob, you said that, or Mr. Chady, what we spent has a direct correlation to equalization. How about how much you owe? Does that also, in effect, count? No.
Yeah, the obligations that the district has in our debt doesn't really factor into the equalization aid formula at all. The irony of it is that the equalization aid formula, the more that you spend, helps you positively in that aid formula. It will either increase the amount that you get or it will minimize your losses. So it's a positive impact in the formula. So when there are districts like Milwaukee Public Schools that pass the largest operating referendum in the state, now they have millions, I can't even remember how much, you remember? $250+ million that they have to use for operational purposes. Not only did they have that authority from the voters, but as they spend that money, and trust me, they'll spend that money, right, to maintain their daily budget and operations, that then too flows through the equalization aid formula and increases their shared costs, which then changes the portion of the pie to benefit Milwaukee Public Schools more, which means because they did that, we're going to get less too, because they're going to grab a larger portion of the pie. So again, you would think that it would be the opposite. The less you spend, the more the state supports. That formula actually works as the more that you spend, the more it benefits you.
Thank you.
Yep. The oddities of school finance. I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of more things real quick. The monthly purchasing commitments, I did send an email to the Board Policy Committee. I can't remember who all received that, with some questions. Didn't really get any guidance or clarifications yet. But what I did do, and it posted both within board docs and it's up on the screen, is I can run a monthly purchase order listing from Skyward that captures those items that we made a commitment through a purchase order for, but it only is going to capture those items that we had a purchase order requisition entered and was approved for. So there may certainly be other contracts and obligations that were entered into that I just don't know about, and thus we don't have a way to capture that at the present point in time. So does this fully satisfy the committee's desires? Question mark, I don't know. But it's a beginning point, I think, for us as we work through how to properly administer that request and that policy. So I'll just leave that there and ask if there's any questions with regards to that, and then we'll talk real quick about the financial activity. All right, he shakes the head so that we're good. Revenues and expenses, just real quickly, because there was only, about $1.9 million in revenues. In Fund 10, our largest source of revenue was from our achievement gap reduction aid, source 650. And you can see there towards the middle of the page, I know that's hard to read online, $922,412 as compared to $910,000 in some change last year. So pretty much right on par with what we would expect. And then we also received $108,000 in change in in source 730. And that was a reimbursement of various and partial ongoing grant claim expenses related to federal grants. So that totals up $1,066,000 in revenues in Fund 10. You can look last year, same point in time, we were at $2.8 million in revenues. And again, if you scroll up, you could see, this year, just over $100,000 in federal reimbursements. Last year, $1.6 million in federal reimbursements. I would venture to guess, I haven't confirmed, but I would venture to guess the lion's share of that $1.6 million in federal reimbursements last year was related to our ESSER 3 grant and our work that we had ongoing at Beloit Memorial High School, seeking reimbursement on progress to date on that. So that explains kind of that big difference. Scrolling down to Fund 27, $682,000 in change in revenues received in November, and again, almost $631,000 coming from state special ed categorical aid, source 611, the top highlight, and then source 730, federal special project aid from the DPI, just over $51,000. That is likely related to some of our title funds and expenses and grant claims that we had submitted there. Scrolling down, not much receipt, just under $35,000 in food service. And again, you can see source 730, almost $22,000 there. Not really any different than prior year. Again, it's just the timing of getting grant claim or food service meal reimbursement credit claims submitted for September and October, and then the DPI getting those processed and returned to the district as well. So top comment, source 259, that's a la carte sales, just under $13,000 in a la carte sales in the month of November versus 18,500 same period of time last year. So reality is that's kind of the summation of the revenues. Not really thrilling, not much there. 1.9 million this month, 4.2 million same month last year, and again, large difference in those federal reimbursements. So, any questions on revenues? Expenses, man, I hate to say lackluster month, but kind of the same. So salaries and benefits obviously drive expenses. For Fund 10, our salary and benefits made up 81.4% of November's expenditures. And I'll just kind of page through. I did some other commentary, but I see we're going to be short on time for the next couple of agenda items, so gladly take any questions on that afterwards. Special education, again, salaries and benefits drive that. 63.4% of the expenses in November were attributed to salaries and benefits for special ed. And then the last item that we had to comment on for is Fund 50, food service programming. And again, we have total expenses there, $417,000, which is pretty typical and customary. So bottom line, all expenses, as previously noted, just $6,759,000. And that's approximately $650,000 less than it was at the same point in November of '23, where we were at 7.4. So that's favorable for us. Any questions there on anything that I overlooked even?
Mr. Nichols, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. I noticed that line 341 under Fund 10, our pupil travel,
Yeah.
is up 23% year-to-date versus last year. My recollection is that fuel costs were less last year at this time than they are this year. So I guess the question is, do you know what's driving that, or is that something you need to get back to us on, or we're just curious?
Yeah, that's a good observation. And no, I don't have that answer, but we'll certainly look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I see the 267,000 this year, 115,000
Yeah.
last year. You know, even year-to-date, 386,000 this year, 313, almost 314 last year. So it's still an increase. And I couldn't speak for certainty on it. So I've got a notation on that, and I'll see what I can do to investigate that for us.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for the noting that.
And then I just got one thing. I mean, great job on the report as always, but you included the accounts payable report.
Yeah.
On page 16, there's 4 lines to the Richardson School for tuition. And I guess I'm just curious, looks like we're paying we've got 4 line items for tuition at the Richardson School.
We do indeed. We have 4 different account invoice numbers from them. So it's likely, I don't know this with certainty, but my guess would be that we are invoiced per student, each student every month that's provided services there. Ms. Beavers is not here today, is that?
That sounds accurate.
Yeah, I believe that that's the case. So if you look at it, you'll see 3 invoice numbers for $15,520. My guess would be that they had 3 School District of Beloit students that they were providing services for the entire month at a set daily rate versus how many days were in November.
So we could get, let's say, I'm going to use round numbers because I'm just a banker, but let's say we get 11,000-ish per student for the year, but we send a student to the Richardson School for 15,000 a month?
Correct. Yeah, so typically students that are receiving services with such institutions are high-cost students, high needs, demands, and typically you're unable to meet those needs internally within your school district for whatever the reason. Sometimes it's student behavior, just the needs. So yes, we receive $11,325.36 if they're a district resident. And then, yeah, we have to contract out and pay that amount on a monthly basis to meet their educational needs. I do note, looking at that report, the account number column, that second column from the right where it says 341 is the project code for flow-through. So that is paid for through federal grants. It's not eligible for state categorical aid reimbursement. So then we either have to use the grant money to fund those expenses, or district taxpayers underwrite that ourselves. So we are correctly charging that to the grant as we should be. We got 4 students. My prior district in Marshall, we would send students to the Richardson School in Madison, and we would also send students to, what was over in Oconomowoc, ladies? Yeah, there's some other similar institution in Oconomowoc that, so thankfully in Beloit, Richardson School is, what, about 3 blocks that way? You know, if you're sending students to Richardson School and you live in Mugwanago, not only do you have that cost, but you have the transportation costs every day of getting the kids there too. So we're lucky that they're literally right here in our district.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I think with that, simply in the interest of time, I'll end the financial report unless there's any other questions. If anybody has anything that they've discovered or want to inquire about afterwards, of course, as always, please do. But again, it's after 5:30, and I want to make sure the next 2 agenda items get their due.
If there's no questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend this to the full board.
So moved. Aye, second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye, that passes. We'll move then to item 3A, naming committee recommendation to the Board of Education. And Dr. Garrison.
Yes, thank you, Board of Education. First, let me say again, the naming committee chair was not able to be with us tonight. Some other things came up, and that she will not be able to be with us. But we do have some representatives from the naming committee in the audience today. I would like to just give a show of a good old school wave of hand. Mr. Johnny Moore is here. Mrs. Dr. Schroeder is here. Gene Simmons is here, of course, and a family member, Mrs. Denise, and forgive me, Davidson is also here today. Thank you all for being here from both the, Mrs. Emily Pales is also here. Thank you all for being here tonight. Naturally, we've been having conversations about Mr. Watts and his contributions to the school district of Beloit, as well as to our wonderful BMHS family. With that being stated, the committee has met based off of the charge from the Board of Education over a course of the past 2 months, and we have looked at various different conversations. And I'm not going to run through each agenda item with you all tonight because of time, but we did go through a series of conversations which landed us into the conversation with regards to the naming committee voting unanimously to move forward with the naming of the BMHS basketball court at Barkin Arena after Johnny Watts. We also have Mr. Gratz here from the committee. With that being stated, we also have had some. We've shared with the board, of course, well, with the committee tonight, a list of opportunities in the board agenda. So if you would like, you can kind of peruse through that information. Of course, in that snapshot of information, of course, there is a proposal. There's a comprehensive background of Mr. Watts and some of his contributions. Naturally, we also have some of the fiscal conversations, and I would like to say that after the committee voted unanimously to move forward with this conversation, under the leadership of Mr. Gratz and, of course, some of our BMHS teachers, Mr. Kluge, Mr. Hansel, and some of our CTE groups have agreed to work with us to help design and make that area for Mr. Watts very, very special outside of and inside of the Barkin Arena. Those total costs of labor range between $5,000 to $7,500, and based off of that, it does not require a bid. But I would like to just note that that range there is based off of the possible cost of inflation if we, how we move this conversation forward over the years. The naming committee is recommending that we move approval of the naming of the Lloyd High School basketball court to the Johnny Watts basketball court at the Barking Arena. Naturally, there's a timeline that we would like to, of course, implement, and the committee had definitely shared with me that if we were able to do something this year, great. If we want to move forward with doing something next year, great as well. But this space does belong to the Watts family, naturally, the naming committee, second, and of course to our Beloit community, and that we do want to move forward with naming our basketball court after Mr. Watts. With that being stated, I do have Mr. Jim Simmons here. Not Gene Simmons, that's the rock star there. But I guess, he does his in music. We do have Mr. Simmons here. I did ask to say just a few words about, the impact of Mr. Watts, and then we'll move forward with a recommendation and vote for action. Mr. Simmons.
You don't have to, I have my tassel. You don't have to worry about whenever I speak, because I'm always, as mentioned, guided by two of the greatest speeches in American history, the Gettysburg Address and I Have a Dream. And they were done very quick, very short, and to the point. Good evening, Superintendent Garrison, Board President Johnson, Vice President Nichols, and members of the Beloit Board of Education. My name is James Simmons, Director of the Anatomy and Music Clinic, based in Beloit, Wisconsin since 1957. I want to thank the naming committee for the time that they have put into the discussion of the naming of the court inside the Barkin Arena, the Johnny Watts Court. There are too many people to thank for bringing this process to this point at this time, but they will be recognized once the planning of the celebration begins. It is my honor to bring to the attention of the Beloit community a graduate of Beloit Memorial High School, just one of the many people that have benefited from their education in the Beloit School District, and through this excellent education have contributed to the benefit of our society. I'm looking forward to the formation of the celebration committee so I can say these 4 words that I've been waiting to say for over 3.5 years as this process developed. Let the celebration begin. The rallying cry for the celebration will be what Johnny's peers said about him under his senior picture in the 1934 Beloit High School yearbook. The students wrote, "Nuff said." I want to thank the Watts family because of the dignity and patience that they have shown during this process over the last 3.5 years for the proper recognition of their beloved Johnny. Thank you.
And again, like Mr. Simmons mentioned, I think it's fitting that Mr. Watts' fellow students wrote in the yearbook many years ago, "Enough said." I'll turn it over to the board for consideration in this matter.
Well, I'll say thank you for doing it. I think the diligence you've taken to bring this in front of us, I've heard about it for 3 years, and it started before I was on the board, so kudos to you. I don't have any more questions on it, but as this is an action item, if anyone would want to move this to the full board, I would entertain that motion.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just a comment. Mr. Simmons, I want to congratulate you on your perseverance. I mean, this has been close to your heart for a long time.
Well, I can tell you that I had confidence in the Beloit School District. I'm a graduate. So I knew when it finally came down to the facts and so forth, I knew the Beloit School District would do the right thing.
Yeah, well, my congratulations to you because you've done the right thing from the very beginning. And I just wish there were videos from back in those days because I would love to have watched a 15-12 game or whatever it was in those days. That's just hard to believe, but things change as the world moves forward. But I played basketball in small gyms too, where you'd hit the wall if you stepped a foot outside the line. So I just can't. It's heartwarming for me to know that this is being done. So thank you,
Mr. Hankins.
Oh, yes, I don't want to water down anything, but housekeeping end on the cost side of it. And again, not to water it down at all, but I've heard, Mr. Bricko, is there going to be, I know there's some costs involved in doing this, i.e. on the floor and doing it. And I also heard, and I don't know this, that there was going to be some work done in the gymnasium. So I'm asking, is there work going to be done, and does this coincide with some labor that would be so we're cost effective in doing that? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Board Member Hankins. I know there are conversations being had with looking at potential investments and upgrades to the Barkin Arena. This, my understanding, and Mr. Gratz, correct me if I'm wrong, would not coincide with that cost of the upgrades, bleachers, court. This is separate from that.
Okay, thank you, but we wouldn't be, as I've seen cities do, pave a street and then re-tear it up to do something different with it.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Dr. Garrison?
Yeah, just real quick, thank you for bringing that thought to the conversation, Mr. Hankins. We know that there's some greater needs that we have in our Barkin Arena, and I know you brought it up, and since it's out there, I didn't bring it up, so you did. We will have to address some of those needs in the near future. I think that'll be fitting to this conversation. Naturally, when we talk about anything that's done on the floor, you also got to talk about things that's done in the bleachers, and so that whole overall cost will be a substantial amount that will need to be more in a conversation through donations, booster, and or referendum, right? Different ways to look at that overall cost. But this naming committee conversation is about naturally them wanting to move the naming of the court forward. So thank you so much for your questions.
All right, any other discussion? All right, the motion on the floor is to move this to the full board. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item 3B, the proposed summer 25 Aldridge roof partial replacement. And I'll leave that to Mr.
I'll start.
Bricko. Oh, Dr.
start.
Garrison.
So last month we did bring this conversation to the Business Operations and Finance Committee in regards to some of our roofing needs here at Aldridge Intermediate School. I want to just note that our needs in our roofing is substantial across the board. Aldridge, one could argue, has some greater needs because naturally it just does. Mr. Bricko and Mr. Chady, I did ask to bring this to the board more than once so that we have time to have that overall discussion. We know that these needs are ongoing in our district right now. And so I did want to just start off with saying that, and that's why it is back to the committee for a further discussion. And now, of course, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bricko and Mr. Chady. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Yes, and just to piggyback off of that, we were here last month, as Dr. Garrison mentioned, bringing forward the bid tabulations that we received over a year ago, in fact, around the same time that Hackett, we had voted, or the board had voted to move forward on replacing sections A and B in Hackett. So we're back here a year now. I spoke with our contractors this morning, and the point that I brought up last month is the current bids, the lowest bids of the three that came in, both GBR and Roofers Mart are still honoring those rates, which in my career is a very rare thing if you're holding out on over a year of waiting to move forward on this. So I just want to keep that in mind too, that these rates are being honored from what they were a year ago. And as Dr. Garrison mentioned too, as I oftentimes remind the board when coming to present, the district invested a lot of resources and time, money, and energy back in the fall of 2023, shortly after I arrived, in the facilities assessment report. And the intent of that was to bring the data into the district for the first time in over a decade to showcase where our priorities need to be focused on a capital level. So, I look at that as, I've often mentioned, sort of a blueprint and a guide for me in my position to point us in the direction of where our priorities should be. So just kind of reminding folks of where that is. I say we make good on that investment of having that wealth of data and moving forward on the items like roofing needs and a whole host of others that I'm sure you'll hear from me in the next 5 to 10 years. So I guess, you all have seen this presentation. If you have questions, do we want to go through the whole deck of slides again, or?
I mean, I would be open to any other suggestions, but it looks like it's pretty much the same slide decks that we
Yep.
that we saw, and I think it comes down to the same question. When you come to replacing a roof, you either do it now or you do it later, right?
Right.
'Cause and we chose later a year ago,
Yep.
and so later's here now, right?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I can put money on it that these rates will not be the same if we prolong and kick the can to summer of '26. And as looking at these types of projects, really summer is the time that we do these things. And we've already begun planning for summer school, identifying those site locations. Aldridge is off the market, so to speak. So that is kind of, we've got full range to get these kind of projects done at Aldridge over the summer, so.
Any questions from committee members? Dr. Garrison?
Yes, just a note too, this is being brought back also based off of our conversations from last year that we put it off and to bring it back this year. And so in honoring that space, that's what we're doing. I just want to make sure we noted that part too. This was something that we brought up 2 years ago in a nutshell. And again, here we are today with this thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just putting up on this screen, I'll try to make that bigger again. So the highlighted sections of the roofing in yellow are those sections that are due for replacement. You can see that they date back to 1990 and go forward to 2000. So, it certainly towards the end of their lifespan. The district has about 700,000 square feet of roofing between all of our facilities across the district. So it's really important that, or wise, I think, that the district make an investment into various square footages each and every summer, just trying to stay on top of, because otherwise we find ourselves with a large failure, and with large failures comes large expenses. So.
Yeah, and on that note too, I was actually crunching some numbers on that 700,000 square foot mark, and what we're looking at for Aldridge is about 9% of that 700,000 total square foot of what we'd be focused on summer of '25 with those sections A through L at Aldridge.
Okay, fair enough. Hearing no other questions, we'll certainly have a chance to discuss if there's a motion brought forward. I would entertain one now.
I move that we approve the roofing projects for Aldridge Middle School for this summer.
I second.
Got a motion, and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? None. That passes unanimously, so that'll be on the full board agenda this evening. We'll move on. Item 4A, next meeting date. I believe that's going to be Tuesday, February 4th at, it says 5:30 PM. We'll see. I think that's our placeholder. That's what we have for right now. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? We are adjourned. The full business meeting will begin at approximately 6 PM.
Good evening. It is 6 o'clock. I would like to call tonight's meeting to order. Ms. Schultz, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Greg Schneider,
Present.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Brian Nichols,
Here.
Brian Anderson,
Here?
Tom Hankins,
Here.
Megan Miller. I believe she'll be joining us later. And Tia Johnson.
Present.
All members are present then, except Megan Miller.
Thank you. Can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Brian Nichols, seconded by Brian Anderson. Any discussion?
Yes.
Hearing,
Yes,
Oh.
I would like to remove item 6C and postpone that until our next meeting so that the whole board can discuss new information in closed session.
is that a motion, or I don't see that there is any new information.
There is to the entire board.
I'm going to leave that on unless the will of the board is to have it removed. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
My hand is raised.
No, I did not realize that. Mrs. Levy?
Thank you so much. I too would like to remove item 6C, and it's even difficult to discuss unless we are in closed session, but for some reason, a closed session component to that item is being denied.
If the board wants to go in closed session, it is the will of the board to go into closed session.
Well, when I emailed you and requested that, you told me it was unnecessary. So that did not seem like the will of the board. That seemed like the will of you.
It is unnecessary, and it was too late to add it to the agenda. At this time, I still feel it's unnecessary, and unless that's a motion, I'd like to move on. All in favor of the agenda as is?
I did make that in the form of a motion.
Excuse me?
My request was in the form of a motion.
I did not hear it as in the form of a motion.
The quote was, "I move that item 6C be postponed until our next meeting so that the whole board can discuss new information in closed session."
Okay, so we have a
Second?
motion, an amendment to remove 6C by Greg Schneider, seconded by Amy Levy. Any discussion? Ms. Schultz, may we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Tom Hankins,
Let me just clarify. So we're voting to remove it. Is that correct?
Yes, that is, remove it and postpone it to next month is the motion, the current motion.
Nay.
Brian Anderson,
Nay.
Brian Nichols,
Nay.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Greg Schneider,
Aye.
Tia Johnson.
Nay.
The motion failed.
Thank you. All in favor? Any other discussion on the approval of the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Nay.
All opposed? Thank you. Motion carries 4-2, unless Ms. Miller has joined us yet. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Before we do the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, I would like to take a moment and recognize that our flags are at half-mast and take a moment of silence in memory and reflection of the late President Carter, who emulated servant leadership, as well as a moment to recognize the work and service of the late Senator Cullen, who provided wisdom and tranquility throughout the Rock County area. Thank you. Dr. Gerson, do we have someone for the... Yep.
We do not have anyone tonight scheduled to
Okay.
do the Pledge of Allegiance, so I ask that you proceed.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to lead the Pledge of Allegiance tonight? Oh, come on, don't be shy. Okay. Please stand. Thank you. The next item, the board president's report. And tonight I have a brief PowerPoint. Ms. Shope, do I pull that up? Do you pull that up on your computer or do I pull it up on mine? Well, I have no qualms in admitting I am not familiar with a Doodle worksheet, so or Google Worksheet. If you could help me navigate through this, I would really appreciate that. Welcome back. I hope everyone had a wonderful winter break and got to spend time with your family and enjoy good food and make good memories. And I'm hoping we can all start off the new year together on the right foot. To begin, I have requested the board clerk to resume the practice of timekeeping the length of the board meetings as per policy 171, regular board meetings. All board meetings will operate with the following time limits. Regular board meetings will be limited to 2 hours plus any approved half-hour extensions. Board Clerk Hankins has agreed to help us in this respect. On December 18th, many of us were able to attend the Civics Academy. Wisconsin Policy Forum presents the SDB data tool. Thank you to the Wisconsin Policy Forum and to the School District of Beloit staff who helped develop this tool for our community to have easier access to information. Thank you also to the Hendricks Family Foundation and the Beloit Public Library for sponsoring this project. Let's see. Michelle, how are you doing?
Sorry, I have it open, but my presentation mode doesn't want to show it.
Oh, okay, well, maybe I can have, oh, there you got it, great.
Thank you.
Someone's got it up. Over the break, I took time to explore the data tool that is available on the Beloit Public Library's website. It can also be accessed through the Wisconsin Policy Forum. Both links are on this PowerPoint. There are a few data sets I want to share with you tonight. Next slide, please. The first, the financial information from the DPI is through the 22-23 school year, but later you'll see the academic data is through the 23-24 school year. Looking first at the finances for the 22-23 total operating spending per student, you'll notice the school district of Beloit was the second highest relative to our state peers. This is the graph that appears on the left. The blue bar represents Beloit. The graph on the right with the red bars shows what our total operating spending per student has been for the years from the 2012-2013 school year through the 2020-2023 school year. There are factors to justify increased spending, such as inflation and COVID. However, we are gradually trending further away from the state average, which is represented by the black line. Next slide, please. This slide has the school district's ACT results as a percentage of students who are college ready in that subject. English and reading are the top two graphs. The bottom two are math and science. While we can celebrate the positive results across all subject areas that was achieved in 2022-23 school year, the following year actually has the lowest performance, even worse than the first year back from COVID. The trend in ACT performance over recent years is inverse to what the trend of our spending has been. Next slide, please. Here, this is the ACT results broken down by race/ethnicity. Again, English and reading are the top two graphs, math and science are the bottom two. Our white students' performance has a steeper overall decline, again, except for the 22-23 school year. In fact, some of the data points again show us performing worse than during COVID. Next slide, please. The data of the ACT results parsed by economic status reveal similar trends as previous slides. The blue line represents not economically disadvantaged. The red line is the economically disadvantaged. These data sets do not represent the entirety of the school district of Beloit, but they are areas of concern which we must address. I have suggested to Dr. Garrison that he present to us over the next 3 months an action plan for improving each of our lowest 3 performing elementary schools. This will allow us to know what strategies and targeted interventions are being implemented and how we can support the superintendent and district staff in our collective efforts to establish meaningful, sustainable, and equitable positive changes. We want to know what specifics are being done to get all of our students to a meet expectations level. We mustn't be complacent in the status quo. Academic achievement is only one aspect of a student's success. We have much to be proud of here in the school district of Beloit. Just prior to the winter break, I got to experience an incredible musical performance at Converse Elementary. Ms. Brass and the entire Converse staff did an awesome job of producing and directing all the students. The show included costumes, props, lighting effects, even confetti snow. It was absolutely the most impressive elementary school performance I have ever seen. Even with all of these extra touches that the staff had put on, nothing compared to the musical and performative talents of the Converse students. Kudos to all Converse students and staff. Thank you for sharing your talents with our community. Together, all of us, parents, community members, business, siblings, all of us, we can work together and make our district better. We can make improvements. We need to focus on what's important, and that's the success of our students. Let's move this district forward and uplift all, elevate all, and let's thrive in 2025. This concludes my president's report. Next, we have announcements and next meetings. Mr. Hankins?
Thank you, Board President Johnson. Good evening. The Board of Education hopes everyone enjoyed the winter break and was able to spend time with family and friends. Our future board meeting dates include a policy committee tomorrow night, Wednesday, January 8th at 5:30. Brian Nichols says it will be a short one. I doubt it. Board workshop on Thursday, January 9th at 5 p.m. on the referendum. Please attend. Board workshop on Monday, January 13th at 5 p.m. on the referendum. During these two workshops, the board members will hear proposals and there is the potential for action. Rescheduled Teaching, Learning, and Equity and People Services Committee meeting and regular board meeting on January 14th, beginning at 5 p.m. This reschedule is due to the Education Convention in Milwaukee that board members and several admins will be attending on a regularly scheduled night. This is a statewide annual convention held each January in Milwaukee. Thank you, and this ends the announcement for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Hankins. Next up is recognitions. The purpose of this is to recognize and honor staff, students, community members, and partners for their outstanding achievements, goals, or service. Dr. Garrison?
So tonight we have our, as you mentioned, our Imagine Math program in recognition of our Dr. Kelly Gorud. First of all, let me just say our Imagine Math program has been going on for almost 3 years now, and we have made some awesome opportunities in that space. And I would like to bring up first Mrs. Mortek, who will introduce this next portion of tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Not yet, Dr. Mortek. It's coming though. Okay, so I wanted to recognize Dr. Kelly Gorud for the work that she's done in the school district, specifically Imagine Math as a supplemental integrated tech that we brought in 3 years ago. Based on a longitudinal study, we had looked at our previous program and we weren't seeing the gains that we wanted to see, so we brought in a new one and implemented it. And there's direct correlation to some of the other assessments that we're utilizing. And so it's been a collective effort, but led by Dr. Gorud and Meredith, who is our coordinator that works with her. And in addition, what's cool about this particular program is the company invests in local charities. So the students have identified a couple local charities and then they have a pay it forward. And so over the last up to date 3 years, we've donated just under $11,000 to named charities of the Welty Environmental Center and Community Action, which is wonderful. I think it's such a valuable lesson for our students about how they give back to their community, and it's a wonderful partnership with the Imagine Math company. And again, that high implementation and efforts have been through the work of Dr. Gorud. She also has led a district initiative to adopt the Eureka Math series. Prior to COVID, we had a different curriculum, and so under her leadership, that work has been adopted. She has accepted another role, so she will be moving forward. And so I'm just going to take a minute to personalize because I've had such a joy working alongside Dr. Gorod. And she'll appreciate this because she's a book person like I am. So there's a popular book for people that have been in leadership for a while. It's written by Kim Scott. It's called Radical Candor. She was an executive for Google and wrote this book. But she talks about in the book about recognizing people on your team. And she talks about how once in a while you get the opportunity to work for a shooting star. And she makes recommendations about what you do when you supervise a shooting star, right? And I guess I have supervised Kelly, but I've always just seen it as working alongside, to be honest. And she says, I often thought of shooting stars. The people on my team and I were lucky to have them in our orbit for a little while, but trying to hold on to them was futile. And she said, it's vital not to squash these people. Recognize that you'll probably be working for them one day and celebrate that fact. And I have known that since I've had the opportunity to work with Dr. Gorod. She is an amazing educator, and I knew early on that quite possibly I will be working for Kelly one day. It could be either way. And I know that for us, this isn't a goodbye, but it's just see you later. And I know the partnership and the work will continue well beyond. So thank you for the hard work and dedication and commitment you've done since the time you've been here. Thank you for your commitment to our students. And really your passion has been inspirational to all of us on the teaching and learning team, and I know staff throughout the district. So thanks again, and we wish you the best of luck.
So Dr. Gorod is, of course, here, and she is one of those leaders that, of course, wants to share the love and spread the love. And so she brought along with her some students that have participated in the Imagine Math program and have been some of our biggest contributors to that online platform. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Gorod to share a little bit of information about our students.
All right. You want to say something about Imagine Math?
Yeah.
All right, come here. Come right here. You tell them about Imagine Math.
So something I think about Imagine Math, that is a great learning website for kids to learn about, well, their math.
Okay.
This website is great for people for learning math about for people that are still trying to learn and all. Really, it's really just a fun learning game, really.
It really helps people out.
Thank you very much for everything you guys have done. So I'm going to you guys sit right here for just a second, okay? All right, so these are 3 of our 4th graders from Converse. Converse has really embraced the use of Imagine Math, and so they've done, come on out here, they wanted to picture. They have been champions for the program, and recently during our last contest, the school donated $1,000 to the Welty Environmental Center. So it's been a really, really awesome opportunity. The platform is adaptable, so students get the programming at their own level. It moves up and down with them as they learn and grow. And these 3 gentlemen right here represent some of our highest performers. They've passed the most lessons of any students at any grade level across the entire district. So. Awesome job. Of all the work I've done here, this is probably the work I'm most proud of. Yeah.
And it goes without saying, Dr. Grower, we're going to miss your leadership. But of course, thank you to the students. I apologize I didn't get their names, but Sebastian, Cameron, and Adrian over here. Thank you all so much for participating online. I know that takes your own dedicated time. And I know there's probably some nudging with some of those parents that get on that math, right? But again, thank you so much for participating online. And again, from the School District of Beloit, thank you for being some of our leaders in that conversation. And that concludes our recognition and dedication to our Magic Math.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Our next item is public comment. Ms. Shope, are there any public comments tonight?
I do not have any cards, and I do not have any emails.
Thank you. The next item is the superintendent's report to the board.
Sure. Again, thank you to the students and families who were able to come out and participate in that recognition. So I would like to officially welcome everyone back to school, and I believe it's appropriate to say Happy New Year 2025 to the Board of Education, staff, parents, families, students, and the Beloit community at large. Every year or even every day, we have the opportunity to work on things that have held us back from being our best selves. I hope that we can tackle those challenges here in 2025. I also believe, why not, right? I think it's very important to say that. And it's been shared that 2025 is about new beginnings. And so naturally, let's make this a new beginning for the School District of Beloit. In many places, it's customary for us to toast on certain occasions. I'm going to pass on toasting this time, but here's to 2025 to the entire School District of Beloit. Again, it's customary to do that sometimes, but again, we can hold off until a bigger toast opportunity. I also wanted to take a moment to thank our staff and students for all of the hard work you all have worked so diligently to accomplish this year. We have exciting opportunities that lie ahead, and I know we will get there as we've been stating together. On Friday, January 3rd, we welcome back the staff to the new year, and I want to thank everyone who helped to make our professional learning sessions impactful. I recognize several sessions were happening all at once throughout the district on January 3rd, and that does take a considerable amount of planning. Again, to the staff, I would like to say thank you for your commitment to growth of our school district through these professional learning opportunities. I know it's also a little hard to come back on January 3rd, that Friday, which I heard you all. So thank you for that. As we all aware, on a more serious note, as we all aware, the Board of Education is discussing an operational referendum question that could appear on our April 1st ballot. While our operational needs have been a part of our ongoing conversations in the district, we must continue to communicate these needs to our community at large. Our district has operational needs. We've had these needs for years now. We have made considerable changes in our district's budget, and let it be known that our district does face a depleted fund balance conversation going into the 27-28 school year. Over the past years, we have sought additional support from the state and, of course, in the community, and I truly believe that we are in a critical space. Simply stated, it's time to get this done. Together, we can continue to show staff and students that we do care about our public school education, and we value what is contributed. And we value we value the work that comes from our. We value the work that comes from our staff and students. Staff, please know that our dedication and all your dedication and hard work, again, is very deeply appreciated, and it does not go unnoticed. I am grateful for the partnership and commitment each of you bring to the School District of Beloit, and I look forward to working alongside of you throughout this year. Let's continue to grow, collaborate, and work to accomplish academic success for all. That concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garrison. The next item is Business Operations and Finance Committee report. Chairman Anderson.
Yeah, so the Business Operation and Finance Committee met earlier this evening. You're going to see 3 items that came out of that. 2 in the, right now are in the consent agenda, which would be the November financials, as well as some potential roof replacement opportunities at Aldridge. And then we'll also see the naming committee's recommendation that we'll see a little bit, actually right after this item. And our next meeting date is Tuesday, February 4th.
Thank you. Our next item is the naming committee recommendation. And Dr. Garrison, did I hear you say that Stephanie Williams is not here? That's okay. So please take the lead.
Yep. So to the Board of Education, I know that this has been a conversation that's been floating around for the past, one could argue, about 3 years now. The board did agree to move this conversation forward this year. With that being stated, we've had numerous conversations at the naming committee level starting back in November and bringing us to this conversation today. The naming committee did unanimously want to move forward with naming the Beloit Memorial High School basketball court at Barkin Arena after Mr. Johnny Watts. And with that being stated, I would like to also note that we do have some of the committee members in the room today. We have Mr., if you wouldn't mind, just do me a huge favor and just wave, Mr. Johnny Moore, who's here, Mrs. Emily Pels, who participated as well, Mr., I called him earlier, Gene Simmons, and I was wrong about that. It's definitely, and I was just joking. We have Mr. Jim Simmons here. Dr. Schroeder was also a part of the naming committee conversation. As I've already mentioned, Stephanie Williams, our committee chair, is not able to be with us tonight. Mr. Grass was also here earlier today, but we also have Mrs. Denise Davidson, the great niece, is here in support of the conversation. We also have board members here, Greg Schneider, and of course, Mrs. Levy, who also participated on the naming committee conversation. On the board doc, you have in front of you more of a snapshot of what we were planning to move forward with. Naturally, there's a background information. There's some fiscal impacts, and for sake of time, I'm not going to run through every single meeting of what we did on the agenda, but I will like to note that in the fiscal impact section, this could range between $5,000 to $7,500 for our students to participate in building out this opportunity for Mr. Watts if this moves forward. Mr. Kluge, Mr. Hansel, and the BMHS CTE Skills USA students will be assisting us in doing that. And it's very important for us to note that that cost is also associated with the cost of materials. Naturally, we also have some policy implications there, but overall, the committee would like us to move approval of naming the Beloit Memorial High School basketball court to Johnny Watts basketball court at the Barkin Arena. With that being stated, I would like to bring to the mic Mr. Jim Simmons. He would like to share a few words. You said no.
Come here.
What you want me up here for? Or to say whoever?
You know, when I met the Watts family 3.5 years ago, I'd run into some young men at McDonald's on Madison Road. And I could tell that they were athletes. And I started to talk to them about the historical nature of the Beloit basketball program. And I mentioned Lamont Weaver. And they didn't know who, they sort of heard of Kyle Weaver. But, you know, I thought, you know, the historical nature of the Beloit School District is so special to the state of Wisconsin. But the process also was a guilt complex for me. I lived next door. Andre Neal, he graduated in 2014. the highest scorer in Beloit high school basketball history. And I saw him out there. His dad still lives next door, and I saw him out there in 3rd or 4th grade shooting baskets, and I never said anything to him about Johnny Watts. I had to be re-educated about who Johnny Watts was. It wasn't like I knew what I was talking about. But as you got into the Johnny Watts story, I had a great story to tell. And as I mentioned earlier at the meeting, there's so many stories from the Beloit School District of people that have made tremendous contributions to our society. I mean, I could sit here all day and go into any subject, science, math, and just keep going and keep going and keep going. But this special lady, I got this right, Johnny. This is, her mother was, let me get this right. Her mother was Johnny Watts' sister.
Younger sister.
Right, younger sister. So this family, when I met them, the first thing they asked me, and she was there, they said, "Why are you doing this?" Now, I met them at Applebee's, and Stephanie was there, and so was this young lady. And they had thought Johnny's story was going to be a Thanksgiving Day story. So when they asked me that question, if I didn't have an answer, they would have taken the dinner at Applebee's and told me, "No, Jim, I don't think so." But I was able to tell them to inspire the youth of Beloit, and that was enough for them to start this process. And it was 3.5 years ago. I didn't look at this as, anything you get involved in is a process. It takes time to lay a foundation, to bring people along. So through the dignity of this Watts family, I was able to, because they've waited almost 100 years, 100 years, but they were never bitter. They knew who Johnny was. He was a humble man, and they shared his great memory. And I ran into someone, well, you have to realize in that 1933 state championship game, in the quarterfinals, to this day, there was question, Johnny was undercut, broke his wrist. Semifinal game, he didn't play. He insisted at the championship game to be in uniform. Now, the whole crowd, 3,500 people in the field house, saw his left hand with 2 ping pong paddles, all bandaged. It's into the 4th quarter. The team is behind. 2 minutes to go. Johnny stands up, tells the coach, "I'm going in." You can imagine the other team, probably at that moment, if you ever know basketball and you knew about Willis Reed, who for the New York Knicks, came out on one leg in 1970. And led the Knicks. He'd only played 7 minutes of that game, but his inspirational. So I'm sure when Johnny came off that bench, his teammates and the crowd went crazy because they saw this young man coming out with his broken, he could have hurt himself for life, what could have happened. But so I can say these 4 words, which I've been waiting to say to the Watts family: let the celebration begin. Because I'm not going to rush the celebration. Maybe we won't do it until fall. But I want to do it right for the school assembly, and everybody will be invited. I will tell you this, is Johnny, who's kept the if you ever Google the Esquires, they were a famous group of the Watts family in the 60s. They had a top 10 hit, Get On Up. Johnny has kept that group going with family members, the Esquires too. And I mentioned it, the music will be over the top. The first 20 minutes will be something the school's never seen. Celebration of Johnny and the historical nature of the Beloit School District. So I want to thank the Watts family. And you. So thank you very much for, like I said, I always had confidence in the Beloit School District. I'm a graduate. I knew the school district would do the right thing in the end, if given the facts. I didn't worry about that. But I wanted to take time, because with Johnny's story, you have to tell it right and not rush it. So thank you very much. So I can say, Dr. Garrison, they haven't taken the vote yet. Okay. Now, I guess you're sunk now. Backed you into a corner. So you got to make a decision now, right? So, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the naming committee for all of the time that we put into the conversation. It was a service that the school district was willing to embark upon, and the board also asked us to continue in that conversation. One of Johnny Watts' inside of his yearbook, it mentioned that was written by his students, his fellow peers, the quote, "Enough said." So I will turn it back over to the board.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison, and thank you, Jim Simmons and the Watts family. We really appreciate you coming here and looking forward to hearing some good music. I will entertain a motion to move approval of the naming of the Beloit High School basketball court to Johnny Watts Basketball Court in the Barkin Arena.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brian Nichols, seconded by Greg Schneider, was that? Okay. Any discussion? Tom?
And this is anything controversial, but Mr. Bricko, I know some things are up in the air on it, but what would it look like besides, I know, seeing Johnny Watt's name? I mean, we've seen him on different stadium floors or basketball floors. Is that kind of what is that what we're looking at?
Well, yes, I have not seen any official records or concept plans to date.
Okay,
But again, to your question earlier at the city level, that's
all right.
from looking over at the larger.
But you got some estimates, so I'm wondering,
I do not.
were we presented? Oh, yeah, okay. I don't want to ruin the moment. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Our next item is the 2025-2026 budgetary estimates. This is Bob Chady to inform the school board of the proposed percentage changes to various expenditures within the budget and to seek any desired changes in individual percentages. This information will then be used to populate the district's budget modeling tool to provide a clearer picture of the district's financial challenges over the next 5 years.
And I'll jump in, Mrs. Johnson, if you don't mind. One of the things that Mr. Chady and I have been working on in this conversation is just, a lot of the things that we will look at in budgets are, to be honest with you, a lot of it are assumptions. And Mr. Chady has done a great job at making sure that I'm kept abreast around some of those assumptions, as well as wanting to make sure that the board is aware of some of those assumptions as well. With that being stated, what you have here in front of you is a snapshot of some of the things that's built into our current budget and to the future as well. But we wanted you all to have not necessarily a kick at it, but also an opportunity for you all to see what some of those assumptions actually look like, and allow the opportunity for you to share with us some things that you may want to see different. This is not in a negotiation space per se, but it allows us to kind of, as we build models, for us to set up certain conversations and move it forward that way. We do have about 20 minutes for this conversation, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Chady, and he'll continue that with the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. So as noted, the intention tonight is to share with the Board of Education some of the assumption percentage increases that are being utilized in the budget model. Over the last couple of weeks, we've run a number of different scenarios. We're starting to utilize our budget modeling a lot more for obvious reasons as we give consideration to some of the scenarios that we want to present to the board for your consideration with regards to potential operating referendum needs. Many of you have probably played dominoes, right? And not only just playing dominoes the game, but you stack the dominoes and you push and how they all, that's how I grew up as a kid. I could care less about the game. I just like knocking them down. And I share that analogy because this is much like dominoes. The first domino was upright and we push it, and then it creates that chain reaction with all the other dominoes falling in place. And I bring that up as an analogy to share with you that the assumptions and the percentages that we're utilizing in the budget model currently, if they change, everything else in that string changes as well as the dominoes fall. So as an example, salary and wage increases, we have inputted a 3% annual increase for the next 5 years. The budget model goes out 5 years. That's not to say that the board has agreed to a 3% increase for any staff members in any of the years. But again, trying to align what our increases ought to be, what our expectancies are for various things like retention of staff, that seems appropriate. So the intention here is to educate you on the values that we are inputting into the model. And if you don't feel that those values are strong enough or are too strong, tonight's the night that we really need to know that, because on Thursday, you're going to start to see some of the scenarios, and the scenarios that are currently prepared for Thursday are based on the numbers that you're seeing today. So again, coming back to salary and wage increases, you can see across the row in that 25, 26 through 29, 30, a 3% annual increase. And again, that's not saying staff get that yet. We still have to negotiate that. But what do we put into the model to provide us with the best projections on the outcome is important. If the board feels 3% is not enough, it needs to be 4.5%, let me know when I'll make the change between now and Thursday. Likewise, if you feel that 3% is too strong and we're not comfortable going to that percentage and you want to go 2% or 2.5%, let me know and I can make those adjustments between now and Thursday as well. So just using that as a scenario. We'll walk through it and then I'll address any questions afterwards if we don't mind. So looking at the top row, the consumer price index, I thought it was important to put this in there simply so that we have an idea of what the CPI values were, and you can see the 5 prior year actual amounts, 1.8, 1.23, 4.7, 8, and then 4.12. And if anybody's got the crystal ball and knows what the CPI is going to be on for July 1st, 2025, 26, 27, 28, 29, let me know. But I think 3% is a reasonable value to utilize at this point in time. If 3% is the value we're using for the consumer price index, that then should essentially become the percentage increase that's used throughout the model, because the CPI technically is supposed to represent all increases. So when we look at salary and wage increases, again, you can see a 3% increase in the 5 years that are reflected in the budget model. However, in the one area of salary and wage increases for the school board, it's reflected as a 0%. Not saying that the board's not deserving of more or less, your choice, but I'm simply going by what board policy says, and until board policy changes, it's 0. So we left it at that. On the left-hand side, these columns, you know, we talk about salary and wages increases, and you can see the 1XXS. And that essentially, to me, means that we're using that same 3% for all the 100 object series in our accounting system, with the exception of the pay object code of 182 for the school board, which is still set at 0. The next section speaks to employee benefits. And here what we did is we looked at the major line items of our employee benefits. The 212 Wisconsin retirement system, you'll see that that's void. That's actually calculated automatically within the model. So keep in mind, as salaries go up, certain benefits are based on a factor of salary, like WRS, Social Security, life insurance, long-term disability insurance. So some of those things are automatically computed within the model, and then others need minor adjustments on our end, like the life insurance. So life insurance, assuming a 3% increase on district cost for the coverage of employee life insurance. 242, health insurance. In the past, I would typically use 8%, and I don't feel that 8% is appropriate or sufficient enough for the school district of Beloit for an annual increase, so I'm using 10% currently. Could be more than that, could be less than that. And as we start to negotiate insurance packages with vendors, you know, we'll be able to refine these details. But unfortunately, that'll come after the operating referendum question, the packages produced. So again, we're using best estimates available to us at this point in time. Dental insurance typically has been a little bit lower on the percentage increase, so I'm using 2%, and I think that that's probably fairly sufficient. Our health savings account is a flat dollar value, so there would be no change, increase, or decrease unless the district or the board desired to make changes to that contribution to the employee's HSA for those that are eligible. Long-term disability insurance, 2% increase. In all other employee benefits, a 0% increase, and the majority of those other employee benefits are related to retirement or early retirement benefits that the district has utilized over the past couple of years. By setting it at 0, that does not mean that we're not going to be offering that in the future. It simply means that the dollar value that we have allocated in the past would be the same dollar value going forward. So no change in the amount unless the board was willing to make some accommodations to that at that point in time. Before I go on into some of the other areas, I'll do a quick pause and see if there's any questions with regards to salaries and benefits from the board at this point.
Mrs. Levy?
Thank you so much. Quick question. How much additional work is it on you and your team to come up with maybe 2 different scenarios? So one, if no referendum passes, what is kind of the floor of what our expenditures could look like and still adequately educate the students in our district? And a second version, I would love to see have visioning inputted into that. So taking into consideration the referendum workshops that staff and community members have come to and the things that they have said they want to see in our district. For example, discipline is talked about a lot. How much additional would it cost to have staff trained in social, emotional, and behavior support to work with our students to get at the root of some of the things that's causing disruptions in the classroom? And if we could have an amount attached to that vision, and that could be in a scenario, because I'm assuming that part of the reason we're going through this is so if we go to referendum, we understand what our number is, and we know why that is our number, and so that we can educate our community, not to sell them a referendum, but to share with them our collective vision for our district and our students, and this is what it will cost to do that. So back to my original, like, is that, like on a scale of 1 to 10, is that like a 10 in the amount of work to do like a couple different scenarios for Thursday? This is our bare minimum, and this is what our vision cost.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So we're work in progress, and I think we'll make every effort that we can between tomorrow, and I hate to say Thursday morning if needed. I mean, I'd like to get this to the board obviously tomorrow so that you have the opportunity to peruse it before Thursday's meeting. Let me just back up and say currently we have 11 scenarios produced. I anticipate probably another 4 or 5 scenarios to consider. Of the 11 scenarios produced, 9 of them are for 3-year operating referendum, 2 of them are for 4-year operating referendum, but all 11 only maintain our current spending going forward, don't take into consideration any of the new that the community has provided us throughout the various engagement sessions. So there's been some new staffing position requests. There's been some discussion about increasing transportation services. None of those are currently reflected in these 11, and that's why I'm thinking there's probably another 4 to 6 scenarios to be produced. I'm not sure that the board's going to get all 15 to 16, unless you want it. Each scenario, I can produce 2 scenarios from the budget model on a sheet, and we've looked at that internally with Dr. Garrison and some of my business team. And I've kind of summarized that in a document that we've been working on the past couple of days that it's not quite as in-depth, but I think it provides the high-level numbers that the board will need to look at and consider. So totally hear what you're saying, and I know what I'm doing tomorrow, I tell you that. So,
Thank you so much.
yep, yeah. Any other questions? Wages? Yeah, Mr. Hankins.
On that note, so there is a scenario if it doesn't pass.
There is a scenario if it doesn't pass, and I can just tell you that right now. It leads at the top. It's called our base scenario. Currently, it doesn't matter if it doesn't pass or if you don't even ask a question, right? So, the base scenario, based on using these percentage numbers and put it into the model. Keep in mind, we have a $6,233,000 deficit next year to begin with. That deficit grows to 8.9 million in the 26-27 school year. That's an additional 8.9. It's not the difference. It's an additional 8.9, and it grows to a total or an additional 11.6 million in the 27-28 school year. So the current model, essentially over the next 3 years, has a deficit position of $26.7 million. We will run out of fund balance in the 26-27 school year in absence of any other significant changes.
Mr. Chair, I noted 27, 28. Am I wrong about that? I heard you just say 26, 27. I mentioned 27, 28.
I believe it's 26-27.
Okay, so I'll stand corrected in my original statement earlier when I noted 27, 28. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chady, just one other question on that. Gosh darn it. Let's go back to CPI.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a feather in your cap because I remember going through the numbers with you or Dr. Garrison back in September, October. Not everything is an automatic 3% increase. And I know you know that. CPI, you control your costs, and I know that number can be, it's easy to just throw that number in there. Could you just give us a brief, and again, this is a feather in your cap, where you have saved money and been below the CPI because you forecasted that which hasn't, those costs didn't actually go up, or you tried to maintain those costs below that? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I'm
I understand.
phrasing it wrong.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're looking for. You're looking for the celebrations.
Well, I just don't think 3% is just not, it's not automatic. It's not a quantity. I mean, overall, it's going to be maybe.
Right. So let's go back. Let's just use two actual examples that are presented here on the screen.
Thank you.
So in 23-24, CPI was 8%. The board negotiated with the BEA and then applied to all staff a 4.07% increase. So, there is a good example of how the consumer price index for all goods and services was at 8% increase, but the board said, we can't afford to do that. We're able to do the board imposed at 4.07. The same could be said then for last year. The CPI for bargaining units that began effective July 1st, 2024 was 4.12%. And the board permitted the step or the row advancement on the schedule, which was essentially a 2.12% increase. And in doing that, not only do the salaries, you're limiting your growth in salary expenses and wages, but you're also doing so with the associated employee benefits, then WRS, life insurance, Social Security, long-term disability insurance as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chady. For sake of the time, we want to continue moving down the conversation. And again, board members, these are, of course, assumptions. And we also want to make sure that we are, getting your, some of your feedback. So we definitely have some of that purchase services conversation. I know Mr. Chady may not be able to go through each line item, but you see what the purchase services are there. And then, of course, non-capital and capital objects. Mr. Chady, go ahead.
Yeah, and we don't need to go through each of the line items, but as we look at purchase services, the one area that should jump out to the page is 327 construction services, and you should see that's negative 64%, and you're probably wondering what that is and then why it's 0% each year thereafter. Man, I wish I had a candy bar I could offer as a reward if anybody knew what it was for, but keep in mind our ESSER 3 grant, Beloit Memorial High School HVAC project, that's done. Those funds were built into the 24-25 budget to pay for that remaining portion. Being that that project is completed, that grant is resolved and finalized, we don't have those resources to go forward, so that expenditure was removed from the budget. I think currently for construction services, I believe I have it budgeted at $1 million a year, and it was over 2-point-something million currently. Maybe it's only 800,000 this year, or budgeted, I can't recall, but it's a 64% decrease, and then we're leaving that dollar value flat for the next 4 years. And again, you'll see all the other expenses are being forecasted to increase 3%. Capital objects, which we really don't have a lot of, we left at 0, so there's no change there. And then the only other significant change to talk about is the insurances and judgments. So our district liability insurance, we're hopeful that we can limit that to a 5% increase this year. You can see that it was a 7.45% increase last year. So again, we're hopeful that we can limit it to 5, and we'll see how that goes as we begin negotiating those policies with our broker. Our district property insurance, again, hopeful that we can limit it to a 15% increase. This current school year, we faced a 31.1% increase. So while the CPI for this year was 4.12%, our district property insurance increased 31.1%. So again, we'll make efforts to try to keep that in check to the best of our abilities. District workers' comp insurance, we feel that it's appropriate to utilize a 5% increase in that. We recently met with our workers' compensation carrier and broker to discuss our workers' comp. Not trending in the right direction is the best way to put it. So we're hopeful that we're on track with utilizing 5% appropriately. Unemployment compensation has not typically been an issue in the district, so we've been able to utilize that at 0. So those are the values that are being inputted into the model. And I really feel it's important for the school board to understand, this is essentially the foundation. This is that first domino in the line of dominoes. And if you push this one, everything else changes. But more importantly, as some of these values become known, then that changes our outlook as well. So between now and June, some of these numbers will become better known. And then that'll help refine where we're at budgetarily. If anybody thinks that any of the values that are being used are too strong or weak, again, now's the time to let us know so that we can make the adjustments to this budget scenarios that we're working with and be better prepared to present to you on Thursday.
Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Hankins?
I'm sorry, Mr. Shady, but I just want to go back to something I guess I don't have my arms around, and maybe this isn't the place to teach me, but we are in self-insured district. We talk about all these insurance costs. Where could, just a thumbnail on, explain to me self-insured plus all this other stuff. Just a thumbnail, please.
Yeah, so our self-insurance basically, districts is self-insured for dental insurance. Pretty standard throughout the state. Dental insurance claims are rather marginal and can be easily controlled. Health insurance, the district is also self-insured on and has been for a good number of years. Certainly has its advantages at times and disadvantages at times. I would say the last few years, perhaps we've been on the disadvantages at times. When we have significant claims, then the district ends up paying out more, which costs us more. But there certainly have been years where district claims were much less than what was anticipated, which was then favorable to the district from a budget and finance position.
So what you're saying is that we're self-funded for dental and health.
Dental and health, the district is self-funded, correct.
And obviously, workman's comp has to be a separate.
Workers' comp?
Yes.
Yes, it is separate. So workers' comp, previously, we were insured by EMC, Employers Mutual Insurance Company, I think, or something like that. They dropped us last year because of our trends. We went through a competitive bid process with our broker seeking workers' comp insurance through any other entity that would insure us, and none would. So then we ended up with the state insurance pool.
Yeah, I remember that conversation. I do, as we look forward, and I went into your deep dives on some of the checks and stuff. So that is just checks to, let's just say if employee X has a claim that we have to pay that through a separate corporation?
It's paid by the state. The employee's claim is paid by the state, but we pay premiums to the state.
And that's what I was seeing, all those checks made out to that one company?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Levy?
Thank you. In one of those multiple scenarios that you discussed, I see that the compensation for our educators is at 3%. In some of those scenarios, is that number higher, or is it 3% consistently through the scenarios? Because, and I would love for my colleagues to weigh in, I would love for us to see a visioning scenario that had at least 5%. For our employees, and I'm just wondering, is that already in there? Is that now's the time to make that request?
Now's the time to make that request. All of the scenarios that are currently being used utilize these percentages that are being displayed with you today.
Okay.
So, but I can certainly try to do a scenario that provides for a higher percentage for salary and wages.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to echo that. I think 5% is a healthy amount to plan for. One of our goals is staff retention, so I would say like that would be a good minimum. But I would like to lean on our administration to consider what they believe would be on the higher end of reasonable, because we want this to be like a realistic scenario. Maybe something that goes like, up over the years or however you want to present it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll certainly see what I can do tomorrow about incorporating that into one of the scenarios. And I'll just also share that one of my colleagues in the Kettle Moraine School District, actuary by trade, why he decided to go into school business, I don't know, but he does projections for business officials throughout the state of what the CPI is running. And based on his most recent projection, he's got it at, I think, about a 3.01, if I remember correctly, for a CPI value for 7/1/2025 bargaining unit. So that's why we're kind of at that 3%, thinking that sounds reasonable. John's a wise guy. He tracks this thing, has been doing it for years. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. And he's typically very, very tight to what the state identifies as the CPI value. So
I appreciate that context so much, but Beloit is a unique and great district. And if we're talking about visioning, I am completely on board. And hopefully a referendum is going to pass so we can realize this. But even if CPI is 3, if we pass a referendum and we're able to pay our employees more, that's definitely something that I would be interested in supporting.
Right.
Mr. Anderson? Oh, I thought you. Ms. Miller?
Thank you so much for that. Just as a quick follow-up, Similar to Mrs. Levy's comments, okay, let me take my hand down here. I think especially if we don't pass a referendum, we're going to be asking people to do a really significant amount of work with a significant reduction of resources. And if we're going to spend dollars on anything, it should be on the people who are face-to-face, like with our kids every day, like bringing that achievement up and all that, right? So while I understand that, you know, in a scarce situation, it's not like intuitive to be like, cool, let's like look at an even higher percentage. I think I'd like to see a scenario where there is no referendum and there is maybe something that goes beyond a projected CPI, just so that we have time as a board to digest what that reality might look like. But those are all my thoughts. I really appreciate your response. Thank you.
Any other board members? Mr. Chady, a concern that I have is the health savings account, and I don't know that this is necessarily a money percentage we can put into this. I've received criticism of how we are dispersing the HSA monies, and I know that the reason behind it, because we lose employees and we want to be able to, you know, not lose the money that goes with them in mid-year. Is there something we can do differently, or can we increase this to make it more palatable to our employees?
Yeah, I understand the concerns. The challenge with the HSA administration is that it has to be uniform to all employees. So we can't say if you've worked for the district for 2 or 3 years, we're going to administer your HSA in this fashion. And if you're within your first year of the HSA, we're going to administer it in this fashion. The feds won't permit that. So it's got to be uniform to all. So we made a change that more tightly aligns the benefit and cost of the district to the term of service of the employee. Other districts do that. Our past practice was to upfront the money in full to the employee. Lots of districts do that. But what we found is that we were losing $40,000 to $45,000 of HSA money because employees would sign on, begin their employment, qualify for insurance, take the insurance, get the HSA benefit, and after 3, 4 weeks, months, whatever, decide they don't want to work here anymore. And then they took their full HSA benefit with them out the door. If the board's comfortable with that, losing that value of money, we can go back to that. You know, but again, that has to be done uniformly, and it would have to be done, I think, Dee Dee, is that tied to an enrollment period, open enrollment period? So it would be September 1 of 25. Yeah.
Okay, has the administration considered something like perhaps rather than one payout, the way it used to be, have maybe quarterly or?
There's no difference in quarterly versus per pay period. So if you pay out 4 times during the year, we're paying it out per pay period. They get a quarter of it by that point in time. So they actually have access to their money sooner, though not as much.
Right, and that's the complaint that I have been receiving, because there are some families with high medical out-of-pocket costs that at the beginning have to upfront the money themselves and then have difficulties later when the other money is coming because they've already spent their savings money.
Correct.
Any other board questions? Mrs. Levy.
Thank you so much. Along the same lines, and I think you covered this at a previous meeting, so forgive me, can we do the full HSA upfront? And if the employee leaves, that there's a reimbursement penalty?
The answer is yes, you can do it all up front, but no, you cannot do the reimbursement penalty upon departure.
Okay. And remind me of the reason for that.
Federal regulations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, again, it really comes back to if it's the appropriate thing to do for climate and culture in the district to pay it up front, we can make that change to happen September 1, 2025. But we have to be cognizant of the fact that we will continue to lose monies out the door for those people that we hire, take insurance and depart. Those funds, I mean, last year, those funds were like almost the starting wage of a teacher. So, just to kind of put it in comparison perspective.
Thank you. So one of the things I want to just note to the board is that, you all have asked us to, look internally around, how we're spending money and also how we could be better at fiscal spending in general. And so this was one of the things that we came across, and we need to make that, we made that adjustment in efforts to, of course, save us, $45,000 per year. Or more, because it could be more based off of when people were coming and going. And if I was to do this like big old history and snapshot, I know I like to go back and look. One could argue it's into the hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost wages, in lost money to the district. With that being stated, naturally, I wanted to make sure that you all had this opportunity to kind of see how we are building this space out. It is my goal our goal to bring you enough scenarios. I know Mr. Chady mentioned 11. We went through about 5 plus 8 today, and there was just different things that we want you all to have at your disposal. Mrs. Levy, to answer your question, yeah, we did. We've built in a lot of those thoughts, some of the visioning as well. But please note that the visioning space is, and it needs to be noted now. So when we get to the conversation on Thursday, it won't sound as a surprise. Those are added conversations, right? So it's the base 6.5 as an example, and then anything else after that, those are added to the conversation. And inevitably that changes mill rates, it changes other conversations, and I just want to make sure that we all are aware of that. And so when you see the numbers and you see the scenarios, understand that the district administration is trying to provide enough information to the board to kind of get us into that conversational space. Our goal is to, on Thursday, as a precursor to this, is to, get to that conversational point, hear from the board, hear some thoughts, do some, dissonance, kick back some thoughts back and forth. It's going to be a good space for us to kind of have, right here. And we will definitely, of course, after hearing some of the feedback from the board, bring different conversations back on that January the 13th date, where we will need to be a little bit more honed in. And when I say a little bit more honed in, we're going to take the Thursday to do a lot of that honing so that when we get to Monday, we are a little bit more specific around, well, this is kind of what we're hearing. And doing these referendums for the past 3 years, I can tell you that this is a lot of work on everybody, both the board, community, because we've asked them to come out multiple times, right? Staff. It's a lot of work on everybody, but I do think, as mentioned in my board update to the board, this is something that we need to come together on, and it's time to get this done. And so I'm putting it on the table now. It's time to get this done. I would love for all of us to come to an agreement, but that is a space in which we will have to, of course, work from. My goal is, again, to make sure you all have the information to better position us for a possible request, and we'll move forward accordingly. Board President Johnson, that is our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison and Mr. Chady. Next on the agenda, we've got the board consultant discussion. Dr. Kim Earhart has offered to renew his contract as the services free of charge for the position of the consultation for the Board of Education. And we discussed this last time. We did not have a full board present, and that is why it is again on tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Mr. Schneider.
A board consultant's role should be to work with the board, to help them become a better board, to work together to lead the district into the future. And board governance is strained at best at this time in this district. And this is the area that's the most important for the board to be working on at this time. Unfortunately, the board becoming a high-functioning board, the number one predictor of a high-quality district, doesn't seem to be part of the board consultant's charge, nor part of the board's leadership agenda. A high-functioning board focuses on students, creates a stable administration and district. A board consultant needs to meet and work with board members individually and collectively. Mr. Earhart has done neither of these in this first 60 days. During the meet and greet with the board, he stated that he would be meeting individually with board members. This has not happened. Instead, he has met with the leadership team of the district. To me personally, this indicates that the board president's charge for the consultant is not to advise the board, but to advise or direct the district's administration on how to do their job. This is further supported by the fact that the board consultant has an office within the district. No consultant in the past has ever had, nor any consultant needs, an office in the district's office building, much less keys to that building. The board's actions in its presence and activities are leading to destabilize the district, moving Beloit back towards its dysfunctional past. This is the reason why the district is where we are at. Mr. Earhart continues to say that he is here as a coach, but I have seen no evidence of that taking place with anyone other than possibly the board president. A coach needs to meet with the board if you are going to coach the board. This has not happened to date. When the board approved the last contract unseen on a 4-3 vote, the contract stated Mr. Earhart would be in the district 2 days a week. For what purpose? He cannot meet with the board twice a week. The taxpayers are paying him for mileage on those trips. They're also paying mileage for Mr. Earhart to attend community events, such as the Civic Academy at the public library. He is supposedly a consultant to the board, not the community. There is also no reason to pay mileage to attend school board meetings unless he is meeting with the whole board at that time. Meetings can be viewed online. Those are my comments at this moment.
Thank you. Mr. Nichols?
Okay, I move approval to renew Dr. Earhart's board consultant contract through the date of June 30th, 2025.
Point of order. There was somebody that already had raised their hand to make a comment.
The order of speakers is decided by the presiding chair. It is in good practice to vary who is speaking based on opinions so that we do not have a series of the same opinion over and over. Thank you. Mr. Nichols, would you please repeat your motion?
I move approval to renew Dr. Earhart's board consultant contract through the date of June 30th, 2025.
I'll second.
We have a motion to renew the contract for the board consultant through June 30th, 2025 by Brian Nichols, seconded by Tom Hankins. Discussion? Ms. Levy?
Thank you so much. I will be very brief because Board Member Schneider said it beautifully. Here are my two main concerns that I can share in open session. One, Dr. Earhart has never met with the board. And two, Dr. Earhart has never served as a consultant to any school board. I am not able to support this at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And as I mentioned at the previous meeting, we did have a board workshop scheduled. Unfortunately, due to misposting of that meeting, it was canceled. Any other discussion? Hearing none, Ms.
I
Schultz.
would like to amend that motion to the consulting contract, that first, the phrase "with directing administration" be removed from item 5 of Article 1. Items 6 and 7 of Article 1 be deleted. Mr. Earhart has already had his period of discovery and does not need an office in the district. Also, the dates be updated. I guess the motion already included that. Next, item 1A of Article 2 be removed as it no longer applies. Lodging and meals be removed from paragraph 3 of Article 3, and related expenses must be pre-approved by the entire board.
I'll second.
We have a motion for an amendment by Greg Schneider, seconded by Amy Levy. Ms. Shope, did you get all of that?
I did not. I was typing as fast as I could, but I did not get it all.
I can email it to you.
Okay. Okay, if you could email it to her, or that would be wonderful. Any discussion?
May I clarify the second? I thought I heard Megan Miller, but,
I heard Amy Levy.
okay.
And Ms. Shope, may we get a roll call on the motion of the amendment?
Absolutely. Megan Miller,
Aye.
Tom Hankins,
Nay.
Brian Anderson,
Nay.
Brian Nichols,
Nay.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Greg Schneider,
Aye.
and Tia Johnson.
Nay.
Motion failed.
Thank you. Ms. Shope, can we get a roll call on the original motion of the renewal of the contract?
Yes. Greg Schneider,
Nay.
Amy Levy,
Nay.
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Tom Hankins,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
Nay.
and Tia Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is the consent agenda. Typically, there is no separate discussion of these items unless a board member so requests, in which time the item or items will be removed from the general order of business and considered in their normal sequence on the agenda. Are there any items any board members would like to see removed from the consent agenda? Ms. Levy?
Thank you. I'd like
Sorry,
to have.
Mrs. Levy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to have item 7D as in dog removed, please.
Okay. We're removing the proposed summer 25 Aldridge roof partial replacement. Any other board members? I will entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda minus item D.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Levy, seconded by Mr. Nichols. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to the Aldridge roof. Mrs. Levy?
Thank you so much. Just a quick question. First, thank you for linking the information from the proposed summer 2024 work. That was really helpful. The main question that I have is that it seems as though there were several roofing items on that initial proposal a year ago, and it had been purged, for lack of a better term, removing items that could wait a little bit longer. But if I was understanding that information correctly, Aldridge and Hackett were still at the top of the list, that those repairs need to be made sooner rather than later. So my question is there a reason that Hackett was removed? And are we completely safe with not addressing those roofing issues now?
Thank you, Board Member Levy. If I'm understanding your question correct, Hackett was, the roofing sections at Hackett, sections A and B were completed last summer. Yeah.
Perfect. When I read through the information that was linked, Aldridge and perfect. As long as that's been taken care of already, that is great. And then my other question, and Mr. Shady, maybe this is for you. I'm assuming that the reason that this amount, one, it already says that it's budgeted. So is this budgeted for this school year? I saw the note that it could be split between this school year and next school year, and I'm assuming that's because it's happening in June, that we have a little bit of wiggle room. But was it originally budgeted as a split cost between multiple school years, or was it budgeted for this year?
Great question. I'm not sure that I got a great answer for you. So it's pretty customary for summer maintenance projects of this size to be split over the course of a couple of different fiscal years, simply because of the timing of when the activity takes place. In the facilities budget for maintenance purposes currently, Mr. Bricko and I looked at it this morning, and I think it was about $940,000 is currently available in our current budget. And the cost on this was what, about 1.1 million?
Yes, 1 million.
Or ballpark 1.1?
80,609.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, not to say that the entirety of the $940,000 will be applied to these costs, because we have to withhold some of it back just in case something else happens, right? I hate to say it, we're in the middle of winter, and if it gets cold and we have a water main break at a school or something like that, that there's significant costs that need to be covered for those repairs and remediation. But the reality is the majority will likely be covered here in the 24-25 budget, and then a small amount will then be applied to Mr. Bricko's 25-26 facilities budget.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And that's what we did, just to mention too, that's how we handled Hackett's costs as well. We straddled that between FY 23, 24, right? Yeah, so.
Any other questions? Mr. Hankins?
Yeah, it's just a question on process. I'm assuming that this money was in the CIP for this year. Is that correct? Or is this additional money we're spending going into our budget for 25, 26?
So
we
allocate kind of a base amount
Right.
in each year for these types of maintenance projects.
Yes.
I think we allocated around $1 million in the 24-25 budget. That value can change. You talk about a CIP, a capital improvement plan. I would say that the district does not have a good updated capital improvement plan currently. We've begun that process with EUA architects and with Findorf with regards to identifying our facility needs and working towards that long-range capital plan. We kind of put a pause on that capital planning process because of our operational priorities. But we certainly do need to re-engage with those partners to continue that work forward.
Thank you, I appreciate that. My question is, these dollars, the million plus, are they part of the budget? Or are we asking for more dollars for that budget?
No, so we have monies budgeted in Mr. Bricko's facilities budget currently to cover the majority, probably 85% of these construction improvement costs, roofing replacement costs can be covered out of 24, 25, and then 10, 15, 20%, whatever's necessary will come from his 25, 26 budget.
Okay, so Mr. Bricko, this was kind of something you foresaw coming. I mean, nobody wants to have more dollars spent, but
Right.
this isn't something that came out of the blue to you.
Correct, yep. And again, just echoing Mr. Chady's point of leveraging the use of that facilities assessment report from UA and Findorf as our blueprint and guide is identifying where our priorities and needs are. Hackett and Aldridge listed as the most critical in need for roofing replacement. So that was on our radar moving into this.
Okay, thank you. And then, as I remember, I think that last study is sunsetting very soon, right? And that's why, Mr. Chady, you're alluding to a new one being done?
Yeah, I mean, the district needs to update our long-term capital improvement plan. So that effort was begun right about the time that I was hired back in March of '23. So, looking at, and I've got it up on the screen again, a couple of the sections of roof. So this project does not replace the roof at Aldrich in its entirety. It only covers these highlighted sections in yellow of all of those various sections there. But a couple of the sections, were originally installed in 1990. They're 35 years old. A roof typically, I mean, if you can get 30 years, you're doing good. We've gotten another 5. We could perhaps milk it a little bit more, but then you start to balance that risk, of if something occurs, if you have a leak, it can be a pretty major leak, and then your expenses are going to be higher. Plus, we've got 2 vendors that are willing to honor their pricing from when they bid on all of these packages about a year ago now.
I read that. That's very, very commendable of them and you. One just last little wrap up. What kind of warranty do you get on this kind of service? Is there a year or anything when, like you said, a new leak springs up?
Right. Good question, Board Member Hankins. So with the contractors at the lowest bid, we have our 5-year craftsmanship warranty and then a 20-year product warranty on materials.
Thank you.
Any other board questions or concerns? Well, we've lived in my house for 28 years and we've replaced our roof twice already. So 1990, wow.
Yeah, that was before even I was a student there. So.
If there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion for approval of the.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion by Tom Hankins, seconded by Brian Nichols. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our next item is the Human Resources. We approved the rest of, we already approved the rest of the consent agenda. Yeah, no problem. That was the only item that had been, okay. Are there any open session questions regarding any of the HR exhibits? Mr. Hankins?
This is more on procedure, since we knew enacted this 2-hour limit is 7:39, and I'm just as the board clerk wondering how the 2-hour, if we go into executive session, how does that, I'm just asking for clarification. Thank you.
Executive session is exempt, so that does not count towards it.
And then would you want like a 15-minute, let's say we're not going into, would you want like a 15-minute notice from me when it's getting close to 8 o'clock or not?
No, just let us know when it's 8.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Are there any exhibit A or B questions? Open session. Are there any closed session questions for exhibit A or exhibit B? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval of the HR exhibits?
I move approval of Human Resources Exhibit A.
Second?
Approval of Exhibit A by Mrs. Levy, seconded by Mr. Schneider. Any discussion? Mr. Nichols?
I have one question, Mrs. Almendares, and you probably know what I'm going to ask. How many teacher openings and how many para openings as of today? Thank you. And I really appreciate it since you have to walk all the way over to the podium and back.
Okay, so we currently have a total of 56 vacancies, of which 26 are teachers, 13 are special ed paraprofessionals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Right?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item is executive session. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent G of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to conferring with legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice, and pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent F of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to considering the disciplinary data and investigation of charges against a specific person, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person involved in such investigation. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Levy, seconded by Mr. Nichols. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Ms. Schopp, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Megan Miller,
Aye.
Tom Hankins,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Craig Schneider,
Aye.
and Tia Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. The Board of Education may reconvene to public session in order to take any action, if necessary, on items discussed in closed session.